We know Dalton Kincaid and Brant Kuithe are the best tight end duo in the Pac-12, but are they the best tight end duo in the country?
You are Locked On Utes, your daily podcast on the Utah Utes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for making Locked On Utes your first listen every single day. We are available on all platforms, including YouTube. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, hello, everyone. My name is JT Wistrcill, member of the University of Utah Athletic Communications Department for the past 3 years, now taking over Locked On Utes. And joining me today to talk about Utah's tight end depth. We know Utah has great tight ends. So we're continuing with our series preview of all the positions for Utah, hitting on the tight ends today, bringing on the managing editor of UteZone, one of the hosts of the Block U podcast, as well as basically the face of Utah recruiting, breaking all the news. Steve Bartle, how are you doing today, sir?
I'm good, man. How are you doing, JT?
Doing well. Thank you for joining us today. And yeah, I mean, this is just overall, like, what have you thought about the evolution of the tight end position for this Utah team?
Yeah, it's been pretty wild, right? You think just a few years ago, tight end position was scarcely used, and now, and that you go back to Utah with Troy Taylor as the offensive coordinator, and his usage of a lot of spread formations, a lot of 4 and 5 wide receivers. Like, wasn't too long ago that tight ends were barely on the field, and now Utah's to a point as an offense where they have so much talent, so much depth at the position that they have 2 and sometimes 3 tight ends. I've been talking about this 5 tight end set, and it's for good reason. They've got the talent and depth to utilize it. So we'll see. It's just been wild to see this group come together over the last couple of years and to really emerge as important pieces to the puzzle and invaluable commodities and the run game and the passing game. So it's been really cool, and it definitely fits well with the type of the persona of Kyle Whittingham. He wants to be a physical, tough team, and having guys like Cole Fotheringham being those tough guys that are willing to do the dirty work, having a guy like Brant, who's a big body, a tremendous athlete that can do a variety of different things, but he's tough and willing to mix it up. And you throw in Dalton Kincaid, and he's kind of the same thing, where he's bought into being not just a pass catching tight end, but he's willing to do the dirty work as well. So it's been really cool to see just the evolution of the position over the last few years, and really over the last 2 years, it's been remarkable.
Yeah, and you make such a good point talking about these guys. They have to do multiple things. You can't just go out there and be a receiver. You can't go out there and just be a blocker. You got to be able to do both. And that was something last year you talked about. You had the 3-headed monster at tight end. You lose Cole Fotheringham, who was one of the best blocking tight ends, honestly, in the country. I mean, guys, Nick Ford and a lot of those guys would always joke, like, hey, if he put on some weight, he could very well play tackle too. So you lose him, but you still got 2 phenomenal guys. And the first one I want to start with, and that is Brant Kuithe, been Utah's receiving leader a couple times now. We know what he brings as a player at this point in his career, but I kind of wanted to go back a little bit to when he was first coming to Utah. What did you kind of think of him as a player, and are you surprised at how successful he's been here?
Yeah, going back to him as a recruit, him and his brother Blake was a defensive end, and they were committed to Rice, and Blake was actually the bigger priority of the 2. And so Brant was kind of he was a running back in high school, and so it was an interesting projection to the next level, not just because of the position that he played, but he was going to make a move to tight end as 6'2", 210, 215 pound athlete. It was kind of a unique projection, but credit to him is he came in and he was willing to do whatever he needed to do to see the field, and he provided an athletic dynamic to the group, a versatile piece that they could utilize in the offense. And so, it really it worked well, and I think Brant deserves a lot of credit for making it work because it's tough. He's not been he's not the biggest guy, and to do the things that traditional tight ends are asked, like he's made no gripes about it. He's gone out there and done what he's can to provide that physical presence and to be an asset in their run blocking and doing the dirty work type things to complement what he brings to the field. As a talented playmaker with the ball in his hands, like that comes easy to him. And he had the opportunity this past spring to work with Coach Bumpus in the wide receiver room to kind of help expand his game and solidify some things in his game and in his bag. And so it's all kind of coming together this season for him. I'm excited to see everything that he puts out there this year.
Yeah, he is an incredible athlete. You talked about being able to play running back as well as despite not being the biggest guy, he does do a good job in the running game, moving guys around, mixing it up in there. And you can tell as well from just whether it be working with the wide receivers, doing those running back drills in high school, all the work he's done at tight end. He has phenomenal footwork as well. It makes him an incredible route runner. He does such a great job, and we know he has sure hands as well. I mean, when you're talking about Brant, too, this is a guy who has led the team in yards all 3 of the past years. Back in 2019 was 602 yards. Last in the COVID weird year, still 236, which in only 5 games, that's a lot of yards. And then you look at last year as well, 611 yards too. So he's a guy who's gotten more productive each year. And you talked about the work he's put into his game. So what are your kind of expectations for Brant this season? And just what are your overall thoughts on the player he's really morphed into for this Utah team? What makes him so effective?
Yeah, I think expectations are, he's been one of, if not, he's been at least the top 2, in terms of production, catching the ball. I think the last 3 seasons, each of the last 3 seasons, going back to last year, 2020, and then 2019. And I expect that to be the same again this year. Like, I think he's going to be a guy that Utah counts on to make plays, and to just to be a productive source in the passing game. So, in terms of what I expect him and kind of his usage to look like I think it's going to be a lot of the same things that we've seen over the last few years. Like, I do think the fact that he got to spend time with Chad Bumpus and the wide receivers this spring will help him play and add another dynamic to his repertoire, I guess. But he is such a fantastic athlete. You can really utilize him in many ways, and he'll find success. So it's exciting to have a player like that on the team. He can, and the fact that he's been able to do it and do it effectively, it's not just because he's a tremendous athlete. Like, he also has to know and understand, what is being asked of him at multiple positions. And so that's a really something you don't really talk about, is just his understanding of the game and understanding of his responsibilities and what he needs to do. It's not just that he knows he's getting the ball in this play, so he knows what to do on there. It's not just that. Like, he has to know the ins and outs and intricacies of 4 or 5 different positions. So it really says a lot of just his, not only his talent level, but his mental capacity to take all of that in and to be effective and to be a valuable weapon for Utah. So I think what we're looking forward to this year with him is just seeing him continue to refine his game, continue to make strides as a route runner and as a pass catcher. I think a lot of his usage will look the same as it has over the last few years. Maybe we see him get a little bit more work on the outside, as a wide receiver. But I think a lot of it, the majority of his work, will just continue to be the same. He'll continue to be, that versatile tight end, the U back, as they like to call them, up at Utah. So it's certainly exciting because he's been at this. This is now his 5th year. He's been productive, the last four years, and so it's all going to come together. He's got just a tremendous chemistry with Cameron Rising, and so really excited to see it all come together for him.
Yeah, it is. It's going to be really exciting to see this year. And you mentioned it. He has been one of the best weapons in the Pac-12 for this Utah team as well. Had the great chemistry with Tyler Huntley, then goes and does the same thing with Cam Rising too. Him and Braden Daniels have really been the two constants for this team. If you look at them over the past three years, going back to that 2019 season, they're the only two starters who remain from that offense. So it's been really fun to watch and see what those guys have been able to do. But as you mentioned, Brant, a phenomenal athlete. But of course, he's not the only member of Utah's deadly tight end duo. And we're going to talk about the second in just a moment. But first, I want to tell you guys about BetOnline.net. BetOnline.net is the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your betting needs. Find all your favorite sports and events at the #1 online source for odds, lines, and games. Find reviews and news of every league, including Major League Baseball, NFL, esports, golf, and of course, college football. Finally getting back into the swing of things. Guys, the national media is always low on this Utah team. So head over to BetOnline and see what lines and odds you can cash in on for the upcoming season, whether that's Utah to win the Pac-12 or just go down and get a win in Gainesville. There's lots of lines available for you guys at BetOnline. So head to BetOnline today or use your mobile device to learn more about the action happening today. BetOnline, where the game starts. So talked about Brant Kuithe. He's been the guy for years that everyone knows at this tight end position. But was another guy last year who really burst onto the scene, that being Dalton Kincaid, Steve. And he's a guy coming over from San Diego. What did you think about Dalton? And he was here in the COVID-shortened season, but I believe he only caught 2 passes. So what do you think of him coming in, and what led to his explosion last year in terms of productivity?
Yeah, I think the thing that him coming to Utah, I remember talking to him when he committed to Utah back, and that was during the whole, all of the COVID off season going into the 2020 season. He committed to Utah in August, and the season was still kind of in limbo. But he was you go back, you watch some of his highlights at San Diego, and he was making catches. He was an athlete. He was very clearly the best player on the field at that level. And so, you read up on him and read some things throughout the internet, and you realize, like, hey, this guy, 2 years at San Diego, a non-scholarship program, and he's created an NFL buzz, and he's coming to Utah. Like, that was my thinking, and just where I was at with him. He was a fantastic athlete coming to the program, and I had the opportunity to talk to him. He talked about him coming to Utah. A big reason for that was, he wanted to round out the rest of his game and wanted to be a truly effective player, not just as a pass catcher, but as a blocker as well. And so that was his focus in coming here, was becoming a better overall player, a better overall tight end. So really says a lot about him and his mindset, coming to Utah. As you mentioned, he played sparingly again with that 2020 season. It was, getting here in August and having to learn on the fly. That's tough. So, but 2021, he's got time in the program. He had a fantastic offseason going into the 2021 season. Everybody that I had talked to raved about what they saw in Dalton, throughout the offseason, through spring ball, through summer. And so there was a lot of confidence in him, going into the season. And so, I was optimistic that he was going to be a breakout player. And, I said it on multiple platforms that he was my breakout player of the year. And luckily, like, game 1 happens against Weber State. He caught 2 touchdowns, made some incredible grabs in that game. And, he built on that. And that was the thing, was it wasn't just a flash in the pan type of a performance. He continued to build on that. And that really led to some incredible moments, some highlight plays. He had a couple of incredible catches, one against Washington State, another against Arizona State. And he just continued to, build stronger and stronger chemistry with Cameron Rising, and so really not surprised that he had the season that he did, considering again the conversations that I had that off season, and it was no surprise to see him break out in any extent, but to do it at the level that he did, where he caught 8 touchdowns and had a number of different highlight reel receptions and that kind of stuff. Like, I did not see that coming. I did not know he had that in him, but it was awesome to see him make those plays and prove to be that guy. And again, adding him to the mix with Brant Kuithe and Cole Fotheringham, that's where Utah, I think, really found something with those three on the field that made it tough for opposing defenses to match up with Utah. And credit to the group, credit to Dalton for buying into doing the dirty work, and adding to the run game and its potential there. So it all kind of came together last year, and he's worked incredibly hard this offseason. And just like Brant, like, I'm excited to see what that looks like this season.
Yeah, they both are in for huge years, and talking about it with a guy like Dalton as well. You just mentioned what a phenomenal athlete he is, and I think that's the biggest thing that stood out. We heard about the basketball background before, but just watching him just go up there and get those jump balls, it's not 50-50. It feels more like 70-30 on every single one of those because of his ability just to go up there and get them. And you talked about, just in terms of being an athlete too, what an asset he is for this team in the run game, runs crisp routes as well. He really is a do-it-all, and it makes these two together one of the deadliest tight end duos in the country. And that's even what I'll ask you, Steve. Are they the best tight end duo in the country?
They're in the conversation. That's for darn sure, right? Like, you're talking about programs like Notre Dame and Georgia. You look at, like, and this is kind of the I have the luxury of working at 24/7 Sports, where our bread and butter is recruiting and all of that. You look at what Georgia has brought into their program. They brought in, I think it's like the number one player in 2019, the number one tight end in 2019, I think 3 tight end in 2020, the number 4 tight end in 2021, the number 1 tight end transfer in 2021. There's a lot of talent in that Georgia room, and yet Utah is right there in the conversation with a Georgia, with a Notre Dame, as one of the best tight end groups in the country. And for me, my money, like, yeah, I'm gonna ride with Dalton, I'm gonna ride with Brant, I'm going to ride with Thomas Yasmin and Logan Kendall, who I'm excited to see this season. Munir McClain, Landon Morris, like, the list goes on. There's just so much depth. And I think that's what really sets this group apart, is that they really complement each other really well, but there's a lot of ability just in totality within this group, where, you've got 2 bona fide studs in Brant and Dalton, but you've got a lot of potential, a lot of intrigue behind them, and guys that have good talent, that can contribute. And I think that that's fantastic for Utah. They've certainly found something with this tight end group. And so, yeah, for me, like, I would put my money with Utah, but certainly they're at the very least in the conversation as a top 3, top 4 group in the entire country.
Yeah, and you talk about it as well. When you're like Notre Dame, the tight ends they've put out through the NFL draft,
Yeah.
that's something that everyone knows about.
Yeah, like, you go through history, and they're at Notre Dame, and you look at the tight end position, and I think they've probably had 4 or 5 over the last 10 years drafted, and so it speaks to the tradition at that position. And for Notre Dame, Georgia, like I mentioned, they've got a lot of talent at that tight end position, and yet it's Utah, where you've got a guy that was an unheralded recruit that was previously committed to Rice, who came to Utah. He was a running back. You've got another guy who came from a non-scholarship program in San Diego. You've got another guy from Australia. You've got two converted wide receivers, one from USC and another from Syracuse. Like, it's just amazing how this has all come together for Utah. It really speaks to their ability to identify talent and to find, pieces that fit the mold.
Yeah, and Utah has never been one of the teams that has the highest recruiting class, but in the past, recently it's gone up, obviously, but I think it's because they've still been able to win because they recruit the right guys, high character. They know they're going to work hard. They look at these guys and like, man, I know he doesn't have maybe a ton of film or hasn't shown this, but like you just mentioned, I mean, what if we move him to tight end? Like, he could be really good there. Some of these guys who don't have as much position, I think it's so true in so many regards, and it's just a phenomenal job by this coaching group. And at the end of the day, with all these guys, their goal is to obviously have success in college, but they also want to play in the NFL. So I want to ask you before we leave off of move on to some of these other guys for when we're still talking about Brant and Dalton, why do you think they came back?
They want to win. They want to win and win big. Like that was, in talking to both of them, I ran into Dalton after the Rose Bowl game, and I'm like, man, what a game. And he's like, he looks me in the eyes like, I'm sorry we lost. Like, we're going to run it back. We're going to win this next year. And that just, it spoke to, his mindset, where he was at. Brant has, echoed similar sentiments that, he's here to win. I spoke with him, first day of fall camp, and I asked him what his goals were. And first thing was win. Like, that's it. That's their entire mindset, is they want to win, and that's their focus. They want to win another Pac-12 championship. They want to win the Rose Bowl. They want to make it to the college football playoff, whatever opportunity presents itself. But they are back because they want to win and win big at Utah.
And they have an awesome opportunity to do so, as you've just talked about, Steve, because of the group and the talent they have been able to bring in as well. And their good draft. I mean, I think a guy like Dalton, I think his draft stock's only going to come up by coming back. I think the same thing with a Brant as well, if he just has another year of production. So I really liked it. You touched on another thing that's interesting too about this Utah team. As fans, a lot of people were just happy to be at the Rose Bowl, but the players expected to be there. And not only that, they're not like, this isn't a participation trophy. It's not like, oh, cool, we made it. It's like, no, we lost. That's why you hear Cam Rising, Tavion Thomas, all these guys talk about, no, it wasn't good because we lost at the end of the day, which is the competitive mindset you want to have. And it's what has led to this team, rather than being complacent coming off a Pac-12 championship, really feeling motivated, like they still got something to prove. Obviously, the Pac-12 media respects them. Everyone picked them to be first, but still not a lot of national people who think they're going to be in the top four. I believe the coaches poll had them at 8. So this is still a team a lot of people are lower on, and they have a great opportunity coming up to really get after it as well. And staying with the theme we've kind of talked about as well, we've talked about the future of Utah a little bit with some of these younger tight ends you've mentioned, but just talk to me a little bit more about what excites you about this group. And I am curious who you think the third guy is going to be this coming season now that Cole is gone.
Yeah, well, I'll start there, right? So Cole was a big loss. Like, sure, he didn't have the passing game production that Dalton and Brant had, but he played a valuable role for Utah. It's just kind of like the dirty work guy. He was, he stayed in to block, to help with, a defensive end like Kayvon Thibodeau. He was effective in those types of situations. He was an asset in the run game, where he was able to seal the edge against most defensive ends. He had a pancake highlight block against UCLA that I think got some ESPN love. And so, he was a valuable piece to the puzzle, and Utah has to find somebody to replace that. For me, I think it's going to come down to, 2 players in the mix. And I think it's going to come down to Thomas Yasmin, and I think it's going to come down to Logan Kendall, the transfer from Idaho. I think that there's a lot of intrigue with Logan Kendall. We've talked about him. We've dubbed him the Rhino because you watch him on film, and like, he is just an absolute unit that will move people out of the way. Like, he is just a presence on the field, and I think that is something that Utah would love to add. Where Cole was kind of a very steady, and you could count on him to seal off lanes, to seal off the edge. Like, you can count on Logan Kendall, assuming he makes the move. Like, what you're hoping from Logan Kendall is he can be a guy that can drive block a defensive end, backwards against his will. Like, that's what you're wanting. That's kind of the difference here, and what you're hoping to see with Logan Kendall is just a guy that can bring a little bit more nasty, a little bit more tenacity on the field, and really kind of be that, I don't want to say dirty player, but just that tenacious player. And so there's a lot of excitement with him. But Thomas Yasmin, again, like, It's taken him time, obviously, in having to learn the game, and he's been talked about now for 4 years. He got here in 2018, and it's been a process for him. But I think he's finally at the point where he can come into a position, a role that really fits him well, that really fits him as well. And I think he's a guy that is praised for his athleticism, but he's a strong player too. He's tough, he's tenacious, and he fits in really well in that same kind of role that Cole Fotheringham. So that'll be fun to have those two in the mix. But then you've got versatility throughout the rest of the room, where you've got some matchup pieces, some chess pieces that you can utilize in certain situations with the Munir McClain, with the Landon Morris. If you want to add another explosive athlete, tight end to the field, like, you've got two options there. And I think that's such a fascinating dynamic for this group, where you've just got options. You've got depth, you've got options, and you've got bona fide studs. It really just speaks well to the group this year, but also down the road and in the future.
Yeah, they are set up for long-term success. And as you kind of talked about there, I mean, tight end nicknames don't get a lot better than the Rhino, Steve. I'm going to be honest with you there.
Yeah.
So I look forward to hearing Chris Fowler, whoever's on the call for some Utah games this year, talk about when the Rhino gets the ball. Before we let you go, Steve, I want to ask you one last thing. Just since you're the recruiting guy when it comes to Utah football, and I kind of mentioned it a little bit earlier about how Utah's had success, not always before they got the great classes, just finding these guys. So just finish this sentence for me. Utah has had success recruiting because
they know who they are. They know what works. They know what translates, and what works, what fits in their program, who they want to be, the types of players that they want. They know the types of body types, the types of athleticism traits that they need at certain positions. They know in and out who they are as a football program, and they do such a good job of sticking to their guns and sticking to their evaluations. Not only on the football side of things, but they evaluate the players, the personalities, the human beings that they are as well. And so that's really what it is they've just been at this process for so long, and they've worked together for so many years that they have this, I don't want to say down to a science, because it's not just you're looking for certain traits, but you're looking for that blend. It's an art, and they are in tune with the art of identifying players that will fit well at Utah football. And so but again, it comes back to knowing who they are as a program, what they want to be, and the types of players that work. That's why they've been able to have so much success on the recruiting trail over the last few years.
So true and well said, as was all the stuff you said today, Steve. Really appreciate you stopping by with us. If you guys want to follow more of Steve, head over to his Twitter at SB Bartle 247 Sports. That's not the full handle, but does work for 247 Sports. So, Steve,
Yep.
what stuff do you have coming up in terms of coverage for the season?
Yeah, man, excited. So we've got obviously everything at UteZone. A lot of recruiting coverage, a lot of football coverage. We'll have the opportunity to work with our network of people across the Pac-12, and we'll be able to talk with people from Florida as part of our 24/7 Sports Network. So we're excited about that. Excited for the recruiting coverage and watching this class come together. Utah's done a great job on the recruiting trail so far, and that'll be fun. And then another thing is you can find us at you can find the Utah Blockcast newsletter that we've started, and you can find us there. You just go to utahblockcast.com and you can sign up for free, and that's we're excited about that, to get that going. And so we've got a lot going.
As always. Just like there's a lot of podcasts out there. So if you guys are in the market for a second listen every day, make sure you guys head over to get Locked On Pac-12 for your second listen every day. Host Spencer McLaughlin and local experts will take you around the conference in under 30 minutes. Make Locked On Pac-12 your second listen every day. Make sure you guys head over to Twitter and follow us at Locked On Utes. Thank you guys for making this another great week. So we've covered all the offensive positions. Now we'll be heading over to the defensive side of the ball next week. Thank you for making Locked On Utes your first listen every day, and have a great weekend.